Courts of Thunder, Wimbledon, episode 6, our Wimbledon recap episode or final thoughts episode, whatever you want to call it. I'm Glenn. He's Greg Rosenthal. Greg, I mean, we always knew how this was going to go. We can't really be all that worked up by what we saw over the course of the weekend. We'll get to the women's final in a second, but as excited as I was about Matteo Berrettini and as neat as it was to see him take the first set today and bounce back from down a break and all that. Like, this wasn't – he's Thanos, man. He's Thanos. He is inevitable. Novak Djokovic was always winning Wimbledon. Nothing was going to change that. We have to be willing to accept that this is just where we are in life.
Did we know that, though? Because the story of rooting against Djokovic, and I've done it harder at some points than others. I'm definitely at the point now where I'm doing it. Is the hope and the belief for some reason that you think, wow, this one is different. Because you know what? Like, he has lost matches, and the way that Berrettini battled back in the first set, the way even that he didn't give up in the second set when he's
got
down
one of the breaks back,
two breaks, the positions that he put himself in to have break points in the last couple of sets, even fighting off the first couple match points. Matteo Berrettini, thank you for showing up in your first Grand Slam final. I don't think it was like the best tennis from the start, but it got there, and he made Novak Djokovic raise his level. So to me, that is the story of rooting against Djokovic, is he always does give you a little feeling like this time will be different, because he always plays well enough to win. That he is the most like one-on-one mentally strong athlete I've ever seen. It's really the only one-on-one sport other than boxing, because he knows it's not about anything but just beating your opponent. And he always just raises his level whenever he needs to beat his opponent. And that was the case today. It's just uncanny on the big points how good he was.
It was so a couple things to follow up on that. It was so Djokovic like that. I exclaimed, I let out a scream when Berrettini finished the first set. I was half because I was excited about the prospect of him winning, but more just because like it was proof that he belonged. And I was excited about that alone. So I let out this scream. And then, of course, it was followed up by Djokovic getting two breaks to start the second set. Like the
first one off of like a 40-15 lead by Berrettini, where you're like, okay, now he's coming out strong. And it's like, and Djokovic does it in the way to rip your heart out the most.
Like, oh, right. This is what was going to happen because I was allowing myself to feel joy and feel something about Matteo Berrettini.
Oh, stop. It was good though. It was. I'm at the point where I at least can enjoy Djokovic's greatness. I've been at points where I did even a little more when, you know, people were so against him and really not recognizing where he was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But there was this point 15-30, which they'll show, you know, in all the highlights, was the best point of the match.
Yep.
In the fourth set. But that's sort of what I'm talking about, that Djokovic is at his very best. That was such a big point. Berrettini would have had 2 break points in the fourth, and it's just a crazy rally. And it's uncanny how he can summon that. And I compared him to Michael Jordan when the French Open finished. And that is what it is for me. I just have never seen, I can't think of a mentally tougher athlete that I've watched in their prime. I was a kid for Jordan, and, you know, team sports are a little different. Basketball, you can get close, but it's like, it's just uncanny. Like his ability to raise his level to destroy who's across from him.
No question. Two things to follow that. One, when Berrettini would go down 30-40 in a service game today, it almost felt like it was inevitable. He, in those moments, was so good at, if you are going to give me an inch, I'm going to take it. Now, credit to Berrettini, as you pointed out, for fighting, and he battled and he belonged, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But Djokovic in those moments was just going to seize it. Whereas if he went down 40-15, you know, He did not. This is who he is. He doesn't waver. He just doesn't waver. He's fine. He's good. He's going to be able to handle it. And I want to sort of dive into the joy versus pain thing that we like to do on this show, because I'm allowing myself an amount. It's a weird feeling, Greg, because I'm not a Djokovic fan either, but I'm going to allow myself to feel some amount of joy in seeing something I've never seen before. This really is absurd that we're watching the same player now having won the Australian, French, and Wimbledon. Literally has never happened in my life. And whether he finishes this, whether he wins the Olympics, whether he wins in New York, I don't know. But we haven't seen it from a male player. Obviously, we saw it from Serena a few years back, but we haven't seen it from a male player since I've been alive. And I don't feel it maybe for him because, again, I'm not a Djokovic guy, but the overwhelming respect I have for his dominance, his greatness, I'm allowing to feel some amount of joy in just the sheer, I haven't seen this before. It is truly remarkable to watch him do it.
No, I am too. And unlike some other players, I think he sometimes does bring out the best in his opponent, and he has great matches. And this was one of them. And you mentioned, winning the first 3 slams. You want the sport to be bigger.
Yep.
And I made a joke about how like Berrettini's handsomeness might be enough to raise the level of the sport. But in reality, Djokovic winning 3 slams in a row and having a chance to do a golden slam, which would be winning the Olympics. And he did cautiously confirm that he's going to do that, attempt to do it. And more importantly, whether he wins the Olympics or not, go for the actual Grand Slam in New York is much bigger for the sport. It is something.
And by the way, and Matteo Berrettini will still be tall, dark, and handsome.
Right.
At the same, like he'll still
he won't be as well known, but he now added himself to the characters that people who are casual fans are aware of, and that's great. But Novak going into New York, I don't care. The Olympics. Actually, we can talk about the Olympics to close the show, but whether he wins that or not, the anticipation in New York is going to be amazing. If you're into tennis history, Rod Laver did it in, I think it was 69, and hasn't been done on the men's side since. Serena won the first 3, and you remember the buildup for that. Steffi Graf did win all 4. And so that was the last time it was done by anyone. And she completed it. And that's massive. Like that is going to give some serious juice. And I'm with you. I do allow myself to appreciate, because ultimately, like, we're looking for otherworldly, like improvisational, like magic stuff. And there was another point. It was on a break point in the second set with Berrettini when I think he was trying to break back a second time, and Djokovic's anticipation, like Berrettini hit every shot perfect. And he was super aggressive the whole point. And somehow Djokovic has this sixth sense where he was sprinting to where the ball was going to go before Berrettini hit it. Yeah. And I was just like imagining what you're thinking if you're Berrettini in those moments. Yes, you could try to try to fool Djokovic a little more, and somehow maybe he was predictable, but no, not really. It was just uncanny that like this guy has this incredible sixth sense for tennis and competition in a way that even Nadal and Federer do not. And that's his magic to me, is the competitive instincts that he has, which I think is just unmatched.
It's Thanos, dude. Like, he's just inevitable. It's just the way it's going to go. He's going to be in that spot exactly where he needs to be.
He's feeling himself though. So it took us this long to mention that he's tied Federer and Nadal at 20. And I've heard from a lot of fans, it was like, it wasn't that big of a tennis fan, but Courts of Thunder is going to get me started, which is like the best thing I could possibly hear.
It's unbelievable.
But it's, to put this in perspective, that the next guy after these 3 with 20 is Sampras with 14.
Right.
So the 3 of them are by far the greatest 3 players of all time. And the fact that they're all tied at this very moment is beautiful. And yes, of course, Novak has like the better overall resume and is likely to keep adding to it. But for him, who hasn't actually done that yet, he can't assume any of that. And his answer, and I know you were setting up the camera, but his answer in the post game when they brought up Federer and Nadal was amazing.
I did hear it. I did hear it.
He started with all the right words, and that they're the most important people.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here without them. Okay. Yeah.
But you know how he ended it? He said those first 3 or 4 years, losing so many of the biggest matches was tough. But this last decade has been great, and I'm not done yet. That was his flex. Like that was like a very subtle Wimbledon tennis flex, but he's like, facts. They had me for 3 or 4 years, y'all, but I've had them for a decade.
Correct.
And I'm still on top. So just recognize that he should be feeling himself right now. This means so much to him. The other guys pretend like the numbers don't, and I almost believe them on some level, but they do mean a lot to Djokovic. Well, this is his goal. He wants to be inevitable. He wants to be inarguable, and he wants to win this Grand Slam. You know, there's nothing, you know, when Berrettini said, "Oh, I would never dare to dream to be here." It's like Djokovic wouldn't have said that when he was 12.
He wouldn't have dared not to dream that.
Right. He wouldn't have said that ever. He never would have. So
Of course. And I'll go a step further. I think it also in part matters more to Djokovic because the other guys had they were more beloved than he was. Like, I think
still are. Matteo.
Right.
Matteo.
Correct. No, in fairness, the fans were good to Djokovic today too. They were not acrimonious. They wanted a great match. They wanted a great story. They wanted all those things.
They cheered his big points really well. You're 100%. Right, but they were still more for Berrettini.
Of course, they were more for Berrettini. And part of that, again, is they want to see the match go as long as they possibly can. There's something about
they would not be more for Berrettini against
Nadal and Federer, of course. No, not in a million years.
There's
no doubt about that.
That's a big difference.
I do think that it's part of Djokovic's edge. I genuinely believe that is part of what has driven him is there may be no conversation. You guys are always going to choose to love those guys. And I'm going to make it so that you can't even make an argument for them. And I've said for a little while, I said after the French, the numbers are irrelevant. There is no debate about who the greatest player in tennis history is. Like, that's why, weirdly, him reaching 20 just doesn't mean all that much to me. Because as I said before, he didn't
passing it though. When he get 21 to me would mean a lot just because there is something to it. I hear what you're saying, but I think it does mean a lot still. The only reason why I disagree at all is just like we're still in the middle of these careers, and I don't love like I remember this big movement that Peyton Manning was the greatest quarterback of all time before the Broncos Seahawks Super Bowl, and it's like let's wait until the end of these guys' career before we finish comparing Manning and Brady.
And to be fair, I didn't want to do this 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I wasn't going to say, hey, Djokovic is inevitable. He's going to be the greatest of all time. It's now he had gotten so close, and everything else on his resume made it abundantly clear that he was the best of these three players, with no offense to the other two, who are the second and third greatest players of all time.
I get it, but I also think now it's almost been in a lot of tennis Twitter and analysts say that, and I agree with it. But I also think like the way of like how it's being framed that it's like so decisive is like, no, it's like, he's like 1%, 2% ahead of Federer and Nadal. It's really small because they are so far ahead of everyone else. And there are certain ways you could look at them that they even just results wise, like semifinals and different things like that, you can give them an edge. The ultimate argument to me is just Novak's been better on the tour, like in the non-Grand Slams. And
he's the only guy that's won all the Masters events. He's the only,
and he's done it twice.
Correct.
And he's done it twice. But Fed isn't like that far off of when you really look at it. He doesn't have the clay stuff too much, but it's like, all I'm saying is like, let's not make it out to be Nadal
I'm not trying to
pretend some
like
distant second and third.
No.
It is a rare sport where you put three together and Djokovic gets the top.
He happens to be the first of the three. To go to the as I said, we do the joy and the pain thing. To go to the pain side of it, I feel some pain that it wasn't Berrettini, who I was openly rooting for, and I was feeling myself a little bit. I get a lot of things wrong, a lot of picks, a lot of.
You had him before the tournament.
But before the tournament, I was screaming. I was all over it. Berrettini was the guy who was making the finals. A few of you let me know that you went out and got Berrettini tickets before the tournament. I'm sure you were feeling great after set one, and it just fell a little bit short.
Hope you hedged.
I
like
hope
that was a massive hedging opportunity there.
Sold the ticket at some point, whatever you did. I hope you did. So I do feel pain for Berrettini, and I think that we are always looking, as long as it's not Zverev, we're looking for the next guy that's going to break through and expand the options. We want there to be a greater number of players that are a threat to win these tournaments whenever we do this. So, of course, I feel some pain for Berrettini. And it was tougher, too, because, it was tough to watch at the end the first serve that had been so good for him falter in the biggest moments of the match. Like, you were like, this was his ultimate weapon. That was tough to see. But this was also, to me, an announcement. As sad as it is if you're a Matteo Berrettini fan, or if you became a Matteo Berrettini fan during this tournament, or because of this show and because I was hyping him, whatever it is, this was an announcement that he's officially in the club. And I know that club doesn't seem all that significant because they really haven't broken through yet. I get it. Team won a U.S. Open, but we all know the circumstances. I do not consider that truly to be breaking through until you do it against, the guys that matter the most. He's in that group.
Lame. Sorry, team fans. He lame.
And he's not good now. Like, I don't know. It's
and he's just
right. He's not. Yes, he's not a guy that it's easy to embrace and root for. And
he's a nice guy, but he didn't I love the way Berrettini battled and the way he played big on the big points. You're right. The serve let him down a little bit. But Djokovic just stopped hitting the ball to his forehand about, after the end of the first set. Yep. I would love to see the percentage of backhands that Berrettini hit. It felt like it was about 90, rooting for him.
No doubt. And you kept Djokovic tried it a couple times in the first set where it was like after about 5 times to his backhand, he's like, all right, I'm kind of bored. Let me try to go the other way. And Berrettini was like, oh, please go the other way once, and I will murder this ball right back across the court. And I'm not anti-team in any way. I just, again, he's not
sure.
I don't consider him to have established himself as separated from this group just because he won a U.S. Open that was so wonky and had nothing to do with really.
Definitely not. I'm with you.
So Berrettini has joined this group now. Berrettini is in this club. He is on par with Tsitsipas. He's on par with Medvedev. He's on par. Unfortunately, we have to acknowledge Zverev. We don't want to, but we have to. And there are other guys that are close, right? We saw that during this tournament. We're on board. We think the Shapovalov and FAA are in the conversation. We believe in them as guys that have chances, but they're not quite there. Berrettini is officially in that club, and particularly on grass, is going to be a threat every time we go to London for the next 5 years, as long as he's healthy. He is that good of a grass court player.
I agree with all that, but I would point out he's got to show that he can handle this success. Sure. He hasn't been at the end of these tournaments that much.
He had the one other U.S. Open semifinal.
Medvedev, Zverev, Team, Tsitsipas, they've all done it more consistently at the tour level. They've won their Masters, multiple, some of them. They've been more consistent. Berrettini is a late bloomer, popped out of nowhere at 23. Now he's 25. And so he's got to keep backing it up. But his game, he really seems like could be a Stan type, a Wawrinka type, where might have some ups and downs in his career, but such a big game where he can go win the tournament anytime, that even if kind of like Pliskova did at Wimbledon, like he might be slumping or something and be a 12 seed at some point, but he's got the game to go win one of these big tournaments. I'm with you on that, but I also, had this reaction when I'm watching the trophy ceremony, and Berrettini just says, this is not the end. This is the beginning for me. And Djokovic says, you are going to have this great career. This is just the beginning for me. I'm thinking like, yo, Djokovic, you had 6 Grand Slams at this point.
But that's such an it's such an unfair standard,
I'm just
man.
Saying I know. I'm just saying, like, Federer had like 10 at that point. I'm just saying he's not young, and you never know when and if you're going to be
I'm
back.
not trying to. I don't think Matteo Berrettini. I don't think he's going to win 10 Grand Slam titles. I want to make that very clear. I don't.
No,
think
I get it. I'm just saying, like Zverev, Tsitsipas, these guys, the fact that they're 3 or 4 years younger and had gotten these results earlier, it is significant to me.
I'm not. I don't know that I would say that I think he's number 2. I still think that Daniil Medvedev is probably the most separated of that group, but I don't really know if that might change in a week. My producer, my show, tried to ask me the other day, he's like, who's the best young tennis player in the world? I'm like, dude, it's so impossible to know the answer to that question. Like,
it depends who you define as young.
Right. And it depends. Again,
Medvedev would be the easiest answer.
I think we coalesce around Medvedev. I think we would, right? But, Tsitsipas just made the final of the French Open and took 2 sets off Djokovic. And I think is going to be a favorite at the French Open no matter what. I think this goes to, I think, a bigger question, Greg, which is what we expect the next era of tennis to be. And my gut tells me, by the way, it might be that it's another couple of years of Djokovic first. Then we might see the next era of tennis. And I think the next era of men's tennis is far more similar to the Agassi-Sampras years where, like, maybe I don't even think somebody's going to get the 14. So let me make that. Maybe one player
to the WTA right now,
right, where there are going to be really good players, and a lot of them, surfaces are going to matter again. The way right now you compare to the WTA, Naomi Osaka, anytime she's on a hard court, is going to be the favorite to win the tournament. Every time she's not on a hard court, she's not even among the favorites to win the tournament.
Here's the thing with Djokovic, though. You said, it might be a couple another years. It's like, it'd be shocking if he didn't win another Grand Slam. Like, if he only won 1 or 2 more, it's like that wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world. But it is in the realm of possibility that he extends this out another 5 years. Because at this point, it's like Djokovic is stretching the boundaries of what seems possible in the same way that LeBron James is, but in terms of longevity, and in the same way that Tom Brady is. And I remember thinking at Tom Brady at 34 when he won his 4th, or what was it, 37 at that point, thinking like, what a crowning achievement on his
this is it,
career.
Right?
And he after that point won an MVP and has won 3 more Super Bowl. So Djokovic is so inevitable that I do wonder if all of this is premature, that he's so Thanos like that. I think he could get to 30.
I hear you. I think he's still going to be a threat to win slams for the next 5 years. I don't think he's going to win every slam for the next 5 years.
There's no way to know. But man, at this point, it's just like, it's wild. I do appreciate you, Berrettini, though. I don't think he showed up too tight in his first final. Djokovic started out.
By the way, you'd argue his worst tennis was in the set that he won. Like, Berrettini's worst tennis was probably at the start of the first set. And then
the semifinals were like not great. I don't think Berrettini played great in the semis. I do also want to give a little love to Shapovalov, who could not, finish off a set, but played at a very high level. And showed up and could, had chances in all 3 of those sets. But again, that just shows how hard it is to beat Djokovic in a set, because I think Shapo showed up in that semi and played a really high level, and I think Berrettini played a high level, and we have seen these guys late in the tournaments, these younger guys, not show up, and so both of those guys did, and they just simply aren't good enough.
I mean, right now the standard is impossible. It's an impossible standard that you're fighting against at the moment. I
mean, it's my favorite quote really of this entire year about that Djokovic made. When they said that he beat, another next gen player in Rome, and then it was Nadal and him in the finals. And he said, we are the next gen. He said, Nadal and me, like, we're here in the finals. We're the next gen. I mean, because you know what? At the end of the day, we're the ones that keep winning these trophies.
How's he wrong? Tell me how he's wrong.
And he said that after a loss, I believe, trying to praise Nadal. And I just love that quote, because he's right.
Before we go to the women's side, you sent out a tweet today. We were going to try to do a live. I apologize to those of you that were trying to get us live. I wanted to do it live. We had a technology issue that prevented that from happening.
We'll set it up for next time.
Yes, we will definitely make some live shows happen. We're going to try to do some shows between now and the U.S. Open. We're still feeling some things out. This is still new and a hobby very much at this point for us, but we're trying to make it more consistent. And we're going to try to do.
Poor Glenn. We'll get to this at the end, but Glenn is like, he just camped for a couple days. You know, he's about to drive cross country. He changed his family vacation in part because of Wimbledon.
As if you didn't do this while on vacation.
Yeah, my wife is like, "What? You're doing a podcast now?" I was like, "I told you about that." And I was like, "Just like when?" I was like, "Oh, at the beginning of Wimbledon." I guess that was 2 weeks ago. I should have mentioned it. Should have mentioned it again.
So, you sent out a tweet at the end of the match, and it got a lot of responses. Like, it got a ton of responses, this tweet that you sent out. Could you repeat what it is that you said on Twitter? And then I just wanted to go through a couple of the responses.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I said rooting against Djokovic has been the most fruitless endeavor of my life. I mean, it's just been.
I know a thing or two
pointless.
about that.
And you know what? I decided today, inspired by Djokovic, I'm not going to give up. You know, that's having, Djokovic said he has the wolf spirit inside of him. Well, I've got my own wolf spirit. That means I'm never going to give up rooting against you, Djokovic, because that would be capitulating. I'm just going to keep trying to climb that mountain. But a lot of people agreed. Yes.
Let me get to a few of these responses that people had for you, just so we can talk about them for the sake of conversation. Barat said Federer had Nadal and then Djokovic to challenge him. The tour is so trash right now in comparison. Djokovic has free reign. I don't think he's better in quality than those two. He just has less direct competition. Greg, I'll make a stand here. I think the players right now are drastically better than particularly the players that Federer was stockpiling finals wins against at the beginning of his career. I don't even think it's comparable. Like those guys. Let me go back and try to pull up this list of names. I've looked over this before. The list of names at the beginning of Federer's career that he won.
Hewitt, Roddick.
Hewitt at the end of his career, and Roddick was Roddick. Look, Roddick was one of the great servers in tennis history, but do you really believe that Andy Roddick is a better tennis player than Stefano Tsitsipas is?
No, that argument is so stupid about that, because here's why. Djokovic pointed it out. The last decade's been great. I mean, first of all, he's only a year younger than Nadal. People make it out like he's like at a different.
Yeah, Federer, there's a 5-year difference.
He's literally only a year younger than Nadal. Secondly, so much of that 10-year Djokovic peak was against Federer's peak, and you can say, well, then Federer was past his prime. Well, it's like
no, Djokovic is doing this at 34.
Djokovic is doing it at 34.
Right.
So
Federer was not doing this at 34.
No, he was
competitive as hell. Absolutely, he was a fine player.
Right. And so I don't buy that at all. And second, it wasn't that long of a stretch. Nadal and Federer had each other pretty quickly. Federer had about, a nice 3-year head start and over Nadal, but then they were going up against each other and Nadal was stopping Federer. So it's like that argument doesn't hold any water. And I do think, the generation of young players right now is better than the second level generation. The Nishikoris and Sangas and Burdicks were
Robin Soderlings. Do you think Berrettini can make a transition to someone who regularly makes the Final Four, or do you think he ends up on the list of next geners who can't step up?
It's all mental. Handling success seems like it's the hardest thing to do in professional tennis. So he has the game to do it. To me, he strikes me more of a guy that's going to be a little more like Stan or Kerber or, someone that has their ups and downs, but can rip off some big time tournaments and get into some finals. I mean, I'd be stunned if he pulls, a Cilic and is not back in a final. I guess Cilic did make one.
Yeah, he did make one more. Yeah.
That. But you know what I mean? I would think, but he's got that power game. He's just got to keep his head on straight.
I would be stunned if Matteo Berrettini never wins Wimbledon. I mean, I would be stunned if he doesn't win Wimbledon at some point in his career. And if he's healthy, and that's always when Juan Martín del Potro beat Roger. This is one of the Juan Martín del Potro story is one of the greatest what ifs in tennis history. Like, do we have this era the same way that we talk about it if Juan Martín del Potro is healthy? He beat Roger Federer when no one could beat Roger Federer.
He would have snared a couple of these, and he would have made tennis a lot more fun.
Yes, because he was a joy to watch play. Juan Martín del Potro was a joy to watch play this sport. So, you do have to throw in health into this conversation. If Matteo Berrettini's healthy, he's already made 2 semifinals. He's made a final. He's an outstanding grass court player that already has a couple of titles. I'd be stunned if he doesn't figure out a way to win Wimbledon at some point, with the caveat being maybe Novak Djokovic really is just going to rewrite history and win every slam for a long time, and it's just going to break everyone, and it will still be 5 years until we get to a point. This was an interesting question from Jadima. Is it time for you to switch sides and start rooting for Novak Djokovic?
So Emeka, my wife, never lets me forget the year or two where I sort of did, where I was just like a little tired of Fed, and I just I sort of did just embrace Djokovic, and it didn't stick. It didn't feel natural. I think my friend Pat Darty summed it up best. Right when the match ends, it's well, maybe I should just root for Djokovic. And then he does the celebration, the boob celebration, where he throws his boobs to the crowd. And I was,
which is nice. Yeah, right.
I was the fact that you haven't given up on this celebration after 8 years, I can't root for
that's the thing. That's it.
That I for a second, it's just no, it's too transparent. I want to be liked, and it's too much. I appreciate him though, but I'm not going to root for him.
I mean, I don't think you can, I don't think that's how fandom works. I don't think you can suddenly become a fan of someone once they've won 20 Grand Slams. Imagine waking up one day and just being
you can appreciate him more.
I agree with that.
I do. And it's not a one-sided thing. He had a rough 2020 with vaccination stuff, and
there are distasteful things,
umpires and everywhere. But then I also think it should be recognized. I love that he's a heel in some ways, and I think in terms of his sportsmanship and known for doing every interview and talking to kids and doing everything like that, he's known as maybe the best of those three, in terms of behind the scenes, a genuinely good dude. And so people are complicated, but so am I. So that means I can root.
I accept all of that, and I do appreciate. We started this conversation, but I appreciate his greatness. I'm going to continue to root for somebody to beat him, because I think if you love the sport, it makes the sport more interesting. As Greg pointed out, for people that don't love the sport week to week, it's going to be a lot more interesting going to New York that Novak Djokovic is going for a Grand Slam. I
was rooting for everyone against Fed, Nadal, and Djokovic at a certain point. I was just I've seen this enough. Right.
I want to see somebody else.
Weird. I want to see a lot of other people step up, and so it really became all three of them, not just him.
And that speaks to Ninja. Men's tennis has become stale and boring, with one or two players just dominating the sport for almost 2 decades. I understand that thought, Greg. Clearly, you and I don't share it, right? Because that's why we're doing this show. We take great joy in watching. To me, FAA Zverev is still the moment of Wimbledon for me. It's the thing that I stay with, and I didn't think either one of those guys had a chance to win Wimbledon.
That's an interesting statement. Yeah, the Shapovalov run in general to me was very memorable, really throughout.
No, I mean, I hear that. Right.
I disagree with that. The guy saying that it's become stale, but there is something to that.
I get it. Right.
That the first week of slams are a little less intriguing. I'm definitely a bigger women's tennis fan now than I am a men's tennis fan overall. I'm a huge fan of both, but I am more interested on a week-to-week basis by the women, and I think it's partly because of that, because it doesn't feel like most of the tournament has a lot of drama sometimes. But now it's really not the big three. It's Djokovic and it's Nadal in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Nadal's a factor in New York. Come on.
No, I'm saying
absolutely, yes.
He's a huge factor, but I don't consider him inevitable and unbeatable on, except for on clay. He's in the mix with Medvedev and Berrettini and all these guys, and it's a fun one to have.
And this is good from David. It speaks directly to you. Now you get a glimpse of life as a non-Patriots fan for the last.
Oh my gosh! Well, so many. I was gonna say, at least 10 responses included the word Brady in it.
Right.
And correct. That I get. It was I agree. I've been rooting against Brady. I've been rooting against Brady and Djokovic my entire life. And it feels the same way. I mean, a lot of people feel seen, and that's what we're all about here.
100%.
Thunder. We just want you to identify with us.
All right, I think it's time. We've handled all of that. I think it's time that we switch over to the other side of the equation, where there was a lot of intrigue.
Courts of Thunder.
We said there was a lot of intrigue. Of course, the one seed ended up winning on the women's side too. It just wasn't nearly as inevitable that she was going to end up winning. And it was a thrilling tournament throughout. It was a thrilling semifinals. It was a thrilling final. And Ash Barty made a massive statement about where she is as a deserved top player in the world by coming through with another slam win.
It's so huge because, her first Grand Slam title was at the French Open in 2019. It was, really her biggest breakout, although she had been piling up results. That made her number one. And she's been number one since. That's right. A long time. And the pandemic in which she didn't play any tennis in 2020 after Australia was a huge part of that. So to back that up, to cement it, and to do it at Wimbledon with a full crowd and two really good matches in the semis and finals against Kerber and Pliskova was such a different feel than that French Open, which was all rain and ugly and controversy. And she had one of the easiest draws that any champion has ever had. The final was one of the worst finals in tennis history against Vondrousova. Not that takes away, that's what champions do. They show up, they beat everyone they're supposed to, but it just didn't have the same joy and the same feeling to me from Barty, who's always dreamed of having this title. And she was a little shaky closing it out in the second set. So it was tense. I thought the two semifinal matches were awesome.
Yep.
Really high level. The finals, the nerves showed up for both of them. And I do think people will forget in time how close this match was. Pliskova had a break point at 5-3 in the third that would have put it back on serve. She cooked a backhand, an aggressive backhand long, that would have put her back on serve. And at that point, I was really interested to see what was going to happen there, because Barty had blinked a little bit with her chances to win the tournament, but it didn't happen for Pliskova. And Barty's just a little like Djokovic in that I think she's just she's the best tennis. She's the best at tennis. She's just she's so athletic and she's such a problem solver that she can do the most things. Okay.
Right.
I'll put it this way. She's the most well-rounded.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll give you that, because
she's the most well-rounded in that she can beat you in the most amount of different ways. She's not like Djokovic in many other ways, but she's so athletic and can do so many different things that it's tough to find huge weaknesses for prolonged stretches of a match.
But I don't think she's inevitable in any way. I think, and one of the big things that jumped out to me, Greg, and I'll compare it, and this will be a Djokovic comparison, was after she dropped the second set, she immediately broke back, right? And to take the lead and that she held on to during the third set. And the way that Pliskova was coming on in that second set from nothing, Pliskova was not there in the first set of that final. She was.
I have to admit, I did not set my alarm. It starts around 6:10 a.m.
Yeah,
and I woke up naturally because I knew I would, because I wanted to see it around 6:25. Turned on the iPad, trying to not wake people up, and they were like, Barty has won 14 straight points.
It was overwhelming. But I can't tell you what a wonder. I happened, of all the random things, I happened to be on a boat ride from Lewis Beach, Delaware to Cape May, New Jersey on Saturday morning. And it was a perfect accompaniment. My wife was actually into it. She was watching the match with me. I was explaining how I had betted a little bit, and she was interested in that. And she wanted to make a bet now because I had told her a couple things. It ended up being a really joyous moment that I got to have while we were on this hour-and-a-half boat ride to be able to watch this match. Pliskova was not a part of the match for a significant stretch in the first set. She was a bystander. And then she starts coming on, and it feels like it's barreling. And we talk a lot about Ash Barty and how nice she is. And a lot of people say she doesn't have enough of an edge to be a truly great champion. She's genuinely too nice of a person. She's too passive. And I was very much afraid of that after the second set, that with Pliskova coming on the way that she was, sort of from out of nowhere, that Barty was going to be, rolled over, and for her to step up immediately in the third set and to take it right back was a massive statement to me about, no, I'm the number one player in the world for a reason. I will not be just simply, snowballed because you found yourself in a moment. I'm going to be able to dig deep, and I'm going to be able to have responses. And I thought that was incredibly significant.
Yeah, it's sort of silly to harp on the nice thing or anything, because
I think too much. I agree that I think too much is made of that, Greg.
You're now, maybe that's going to separate her from how many she wins or not. Like, we'll see. She's 25. Her career's got a long way to go. But she's like a jock, she's like an athlete. I said the best two-sport athlete since Dion.
Yeah, I saw that. Was pretty good. That was pretty good. Yeah, right.
Give me another one.
Pat Connaughton is in the NBA Finals right now, and would have been a high-level Major League Baseball pitcher if he had chosen to play baseball.
Sure. Yeah. How about
I guess Kyler Murray would be a good argument.
Yeah. No, it wouldn't even, because Kyler Murray, go be like the Super Bowl MVP. And go make professional baseball.
All right,
fair.
And
like hit 250 or whatever the equivalent is. I did like investigate. Was Ash Barty actually like a good professional cricket player? Now, she was on like one of the biggest teams. Like that seemed uncertain. It seemed like she was a player. She wasn't like a superstar. But for people don't know, before we were having this national sort of mental health conversation, especially around sports, like Barty quit tennis because it was too much for her. And her parents were kind of like all about it. They were like, come back home, take some time off. And then she just used the time to go play professional cricket. And, during, which is just crazy that she was thinking about playing professional Aussie rules football. And Australians have told me, well, this is, Australians all play multiple sports. It's like, yeah. And she just does it like way better, that she could play three different sports. And someone showed me something about how she started playing a ton of golf during the pandemic, and she was her club champion at like a super prestigious club, like during the pandemic. So
of course she was. Of course,
if you just listen to her, she reminds me a little bit about like LeBron, where she's not going to let you in totally, but and a lot of things she says after the matches is like almost like jock speech, but it's like, that's because that's who she is. She's just like a baller athlete who just loves to compete and can do so many things so well and just moves so well that it's like she's going to be in the mix for all these tournaments. But yeah, she has to hold, this happens to a lot of greats, but she was up 6-5 in that second set serving for the tournament and just gave that game away.
Yeah, and I really did think that would wreck her. I really thought that was going to be that, and she immediately responded, and that's
very similar to Osaka when she won the Australian Open over Kvitova, was in near tears after essentially choking away the second set, and came back and played like an incredible third set. And so that's what champions do. I mean, Serena's done it, Federer's done it, like they've all done it. They've all done it.
Testament of a champion, no question. Absolutely.
I think she's a great story too. I just think having an Aussie at the top is great. I think having like the multiple sports that she played and her story, I still don't think a lot of people were just learning that for the first time this weekend, that like, what?
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. No question. And by the way, the disrespect you showed to Tim Tebow too, by the way. I mean, come on, man. Talk about the greatest two-sport athletes of all time. I mean, the man hit like 4 home runs as a baseball player. Could you?
Okay, so I was debating between two names.
Yeah.
One was Deion Sanders. The others, which would have been, maybe people wouldn't have gotten the joke as much, was Jeff Samardzija.
I mean, absolutely. Was a wide receiver at Notre Dame and
was supposed to get taken in the first round. Instead, had a great baseball career.
Very successful baseball player.
And took the money there. But I would go Deion, Barty, Samardzija. However you say that. Tebow, about 50 spots later. Wasn't actually good professionally in either one of his sports.
I went out to Podunk, Hagerstown, Maryland to watch Tim Tebow play baseball one time, and it was a mob scene, an absolute mob scene. I'm assuming you read Naomi's essay for Time.
I didn't.
Oh God, I should have asked this. Knowing you, I just sort of assumed. I apologize.
I will check it out.
Naomi wrote an essay. She's on the cover of Time for the Olympics, and she wrote an essay about everything. And I don't want to just read the whole thing, but I feel like I'd like to respond to it. I do think it's significant. So I'll kind of try to go to the place where I think it becomes most. I'll get it a little while into this essay. Um, the perhaps my actions were confusing to some because there are two slightly different issues at play. In my mind, they overlap. By the way, this is something we talked about, and that's why I spoke about them together. But let's separate them for the sake of discussion. The first is the press. This was never about the press, but rather the traditional format of the press conference. I'll say it again for those at the back. I love the press. I do not love all press conferences. I have always enjoyed an amazing relationship with the media and have given numerous in-depth one-on-one interviews. Other than those superstars who have been around much longer than I, Novak, Roger, Raf, and Serena, I'd estimate that I've given more time to the press than any other players over recent years. I always try to answer genuinely and from the heart. I've never been media trained, so what you see is what you get. The way I see it, the reliance and respect from athlete to press is reciprocal. However, in my opinion, and I want to say that this is just my opinion and not that of every tennis player on tour, the press conference format itself is out of date and in great need of a refresh. I believe that we can make it better, more interesting, and more enjoyable for each side. Less subject versus object, more peer to peer.
I think part of it's coming out of the pandemic and being on a Zoom call with all these people that don't have to have their face in front of you and don't really cover the sport necessarily. They just like jump in the Grand Slam, and then they're trying to make like a headline for the Sun in the UK.
Right.
Like, I get where she's coming from. She's trying to be more out front about it. It's like Serena didn't do press when she lost that Wimbledon match,
and that was
she just left a little statement. Like, and you know what? The world went on. No one cared.
And she did reference just to bring that up, Greg. She referenced the idea of like allowing players to perhaps we should give athletes the right to take a mental break from media scrutiny on a rare occasion without being subject to strict sanctions. In any line of work, you would be forgiven for taking a personal day here and there, as long as it's not habitual. You wouldn't have to divulge your most personal symptoms to your employer. There would likely be HR measures protecting at least some level of privacy. That's
kind of that's kind of how the system has been working. They do a very light fine for skipping the occasional press conference, which a lot of the top players have done before.
And so that's why it doesn't strike me so much. Like it. I appreciate and agree. And she goes on to speak more about the mental health side of the conversation, which I think that we did a lot of conflating of these two things. Like there were a lot of people that wanted to say it's the press's fault that Naomi Osaka is struggling with her mental health. And like, that you missed the point here. And she goes on to talk a lot about that. But that part of it, I feel the same way you do. Like that kind of exists. Like there is the opportunity for you to just say no. Like, I'm not doing it today, pay the fine. And then as long as you come back and do it the next time, there's not going to be a problem. So
here's the thing, as an Osaka fan from day one.
Yes.
She's speaking more with her actions. She showed up to the ESPYs. The Netflix documentary about her is coming out. She did the Time cover. The Olympics are massive. She's the highest paid female endorser in the world. Makes more far more money off of that than by playing tennis technically, and far more money than, by the way, almost every I would guess every NFL and MLB player make off the field, including Tom Brady. That's the kind of pressure that's going to be honored going to the Olympics in the country she plays for. And she's playing it. She's the crowdless queen.
Yep.
She's won 2 slams with varying level of crowds. That hasn't bothered her. She I believe took this time. We'll see like how the tennis shows up, but to me, I just follow like her actions like at that time in Wimbledon and leading up to it, where she was not in a good place, and now she is ready to return. It really hasn't been that long, and I would consider her a favorite because she has generally exhibited her best when the most pressure and like attention is on her.
I've said it, if she's playing in a hardcore tournament, she's going to be my pick to win the tournament. That's
going to be like 100 degrees there, by the way. And it's going to be hot, and there's going to be no humid. So it's going to really test, it's going to test their conditioning, and she hasn't played much. So that could be a disadvantage for her.
And of course, now we know there'll be,
but she adds a lot of juice to her and Novak combined add a lot of juice to the Olympics tennis, because lot of other people are not going.
Frankie Tiafoe's going. I like that. I'm happy about that.
By the way, shout out to Angie Kerber, who played really well in the semis. Yep. That was a good match. And then Pliskova Sabalenka to me was I don't know if it was the match of the tournament. I loved Jabeur Muguruza, but I think for me it was probably the match of the tournament because it was the semis and it was such a big moment for both their careers. And it reminded me of like Krejcik Sampras.
Okay.
In like the early 2000s.
Wow.
And I don't love like crazy power tennis like that.
They were hitting it. My God,
as a rule, but as a change up, because we're in this era of endless rallies and stuff. I loved it. Mary Carrillo calls it big babe tennis. That's what she calls like just big swinging
power.
Like Davenport type power, where it's four shots or less. And that was that type of tennis at the highest level. They both really played awesome. Sabalenka might have given us a better final, but Pliskova was definitely better that day.
Oh, and they were all great stories. As we said, going into the semifinals, there was almost nothing that could happen over those two, other than just being complete, crap matches. There was almost nothing that could happen that could be disappointing. There was a great story waiting. The one we got was actually Barty.
The semis matches were way better than the finals.
And I don't think the final was a bad match. No, I think tense. It was correct. Exactly right. I think it was tense. I completely agree with that.
It was like those game, some of those LeBron game 7s or whatever. It's like 87-83. No one, like, they hit like 2 shots in the last 6 minutes, but no one, cares about that. They remember the block,
correct. That's a great point. That's a great point.
That's what happens at the end of championships. Sometimes, like, people get tight.
The Phoenix Suns won Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals when nobody could make a basket in the second half, and they're 2 games away from winning the NBA title. Who cares? Who cares how ugly it ended up being? All right, man. I think that's just about it for Wimbledon. I have greatly enjoyed doing this and look forward to doing more. Greg and I have been talking. We do want to try to check in between now and the start of the U.S. Open.
Well, I think the Olympics is the spot to do it.
I think that will be the plan.
One of the reasons I love tennis is, I think it's, along with the NFL, the best spectator sport, in the world, and it's for different reasons. The NFL, it's like, it's impossible to know, there's such a gap between what and like what is actually happening. It'll like never be reached. And I love that in the NFL, like in terms of knowing every player and the assignments and everything. It's just so goddamn complicated, but it's fascinating. The tennis, one of the reasons I think it's best is the flow of like the season, that it like comes, it dips and wanes, but it's always there. And there's different players that come in and out in the flow, and you get used to it over the years. Right now, the flow is going to get pretty quiet for the next few weeks. It's these small little tournaments that, most of these big names that you've just watched aren't going to be involved in, especially with the Olympics. But then it's the Olympics, which is a big deal in tennis. And it has had some of the best tennis matches, I think, of the last, 2 decades.
It's the best 3-court or 3-set men's tennis tournament we get.
Yep. And we've had some like incredible matches, incredible stories, and I'm looking forward to that. But then,
I think people forget, like, Andy Murray's breakthrough was the Olympics on the heels of his most crushing loss ever. Yep. He lost to Federer in the Wimbledon final a couple of weeks ahead of that, and was crying on the court, was crying afterwards. I think I'm getting closer was the line. And you just felt like horrendous in that moment. And a couple of weeks later, he beats Federer in the Wimbledon final, and it completely changes the course of his career. It completely changed everything, as he would then go on to win 3 slams afterwards.
And then there's, the epic Kei Nishikori bronze medal victory over Nadal.
People still talk about it to this day. Mostly Gregg Rosenthal.
The course of my career. It is the greatest win of his career.
It was
to win a bronze medal. That's just very typical for him.
But I mean, I could think about the Olympics where when Federer won the semifinal, somebody said, you realize you've now clinched the first medal of the Olympics for Switzerland. And it like took him back. Like he really had to like take a second and breathe and then said, I'm aware it's not lost on me. And like how much that meant, because we don't think about that.
The difference this year is a lot of
Monica Puig is one of the greatest Olympic stories of any sport ever. Come on.
Not been able to handle. Yeah, it was, and it changed her life, and almost all for the good, although I suspect maybe a little for the bad too,
maybe,
in terms of the expectations.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was going to say about the tennis is like tennis is not stopping for the Olympics. Rafael Nadal just entered the City
DC.
Open in Washington, which is taking place during the Olympics. Nadal is choosing to go to an ATP 500 in Washington.
You know, it's really funny.
Instead of playing the Olympics.
It's actually got a great field this year. Yeah. It's got one of the best fields it's ever had, which makes me sad because, as you point out, it means those players aren't at the Olympics. And it's also conflicting because I would rather be home watching the Olympics, but it's really making me think I'm going to have to take a trip down
go out there for a day
to DC. Yeah,
I would. But so that's all going to happen. And then Cincinnati's right after that, which is a huge Masters event in Canada. Canada rather is right
always
after
gets a very good field.
Cincinnati. And then the U.S. Open as we get closer to the end of August. So we'll return for the Olympics. We got it. And how's your feeling though? Because to me, one of the subplots of Courts of Thunder is just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's very much.
Are we gonna keep wanting to do this? Are we gonna want to take out weeks during what's my quiet time of year and our vacation time, like year after year? And
right now, now we've had
feeling the love.
Enough feedback that's been positive. Thank you for those of you that maybe have negative things to say that have just chosen not to say them very loudly. Appreciate it, because it's kept me on board. Like the feedback's been, I told you, I'm greatly appreciative. Peel back the curtain. I brought a little audience from one place on the earth. Greg brought a lot of audience from all over the globe. And you guys have been so unbelievably kind to me when you could all say like, hey, you're not Mark Sessler. You're not Anthony Jeselnik. You're just some guy with a lazy eye. You guys have been very kind to me, and I truly appreciate that. And it's made me, like today was an insane, I woke up at 5:45 after barely sleeping. My back hurts because I'm trying to sleep in a camper squished up with my wife and two boys. Got in a car, drove 3 hours to come back to my house, throw some laundry in and watch the match. Then at the start of the fourth set, I hopped in the car to drive to the studio to come do this. And at no point did I say, I want to call Greg and just tell him I'm sorry I'm out. Like at no point did I feel that way. I've greatly enjoyed doing this. It's been an awful lot of fun. I hope that we can make it bigger and try some different things. And maybe we identify it, like maybe there's next year at Indian Wells, you say, Glenn, fly out. We'll do a tweet up or something like that. We'll have some fun. I'd love to do something like that. I'd love to grow this thing.
I just bought some. The tickets are on sale for Indian Wells in October this year, and
that's right. They're doing the fall Indian Wells.
I'm going with the family. It's a little messy, but yeah. Well, it'll be a test because the training camp will be off and running. When the Olympics gets going is about the same amount of time, and then that's the case for the U.S. Open. So we'll see.
And my play-by-play,
I'm looking forward to that. It's all about just we don't need to watch every match to have fun talking about it.
No, I've really enjoyed this, and I've enjoyed you guys checking in and letting us know that you're enjoying it. And again, we're listening to feedback, ideas that you might have. Right now, it's just
ATP should be just paying us for being ambassadors of the sport. We're just trying to spread the love of this game.
Just love tennis.
People would love it if they watched it.
Love tennis. Greg Rosenthal, appreciate you, my friends. Enjoy these last couple of weeks of your summer before things get truly hellacious in NFL land. And I'm about to hop back in a car for another 17 hours with two small children on very little sleep. But
good luck.
They're making memories, and that's what matters.
Use that Djokovic wolf spirit.
Yeah, that wolf energy. Absolutely.
Don't give up the wolf energy.
The wolf energy, man. I'm doing that. All right. For Greg Rosenthal, I am Glenn Clark. Thank you for being a part of it. This has been Courts of Thunder.
Courts of Thunder.